All right, I was waiting for the song to play, but I guess Julie nixed it today. She's powerful in that way. I don't know, you guys want to sit down? Or do you want to stand? Mike, do you think sitting is the new smoking? Is that the thing? That's what I've heard. You can sit for a little while. Hi, welcome to the 17th annual Poetry on the Patio. It's our way of celebrating National Poetry Month, which is April. And so you will notice that Poetry on the Patio is always on like about the last day of April because we prefer to do it outside here. I'm Dan Gjelten, Director of the Libraries. This is, as I say every year, this is one of my favorite events of the year. And also the first thing I have to do is thank Julie Kimlinger for making it. She really makes this whole thing possible. Yeah, thank you. It takes her all year to find a list of people to read poems, because I guess it's not everybody's favorite thing to do is stand up in front of other people and read poetry out loud. So I am super happy with both the readers and the poems that everybody picked today. It's really, they're really some of my favorites. She also, as you notice, she makes sure that the event gets videotaped every year. So, and finally, she has assembled a web page on which you will find a list of everyone who's ever read and what they read. And you can watch. The videos are all archived there, so you can actually watch them. So, thank you, Julie. And I also want to thank each one of you. So, over the last 16 years, 156 people, different people from the University of St. Thomas have read here. I'm the only one that gets to read every year. It's just one of the perks of my job. Non-taxable compensation for me, which I like. And we try, and Julie does a really good job of getting readers from all walks of life, so that's really interesting. You should take a look at the list of people who've read. It's really interesting. The event was inspired by then Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky. He's Poet Laureate of the United States. And he had a project that he called the Favorite Poem Project. And it was based on the idea that Americans do read poetry and that Americans have favorite poems, poems that mean something to them. And so the idea was, get up and, this is not a time to read your own poetry, which I'm sure is lovely, but it's a time to read the poems that have changed your life in some way. And I think we've confirmed that that's true, given that we've had all these people do that very thing. So I'll tell you how it works in a second, but I like to start by saying something about poetry and the reading of poetry, just to sort of get the ball rolling. Last year we lost at least two great American poets, maybe even more than that, but one was Maya Angelou, and we're going to hear a poem from one of our readers from her today. And then the other, one of my favorite poets, Mark Strand, passed away at the end of the year. And I was looking back at an interview he did with Wallace Shawn, who was a longtime editor of The New Yorker. And the interview was published in the Paris Review in 1998 under the title The Art of Poetry. And in the interview, Mark Strand says this of poets. There's an element of delight in these people who rearrange reality. We usually hang on to the predictability of our experiences to such an extent. And there's nowhere else where one can escape that as thoroughly as one can in certain poets' work. When I read poetry, I want to feel myself suddenly larger, in touch with, or at least close to, what I deem magical and astonishing. I want to experience a kind of wonderment. And when you report back to your own daily world, after experiencing the strangeness of a world sort of recombined and reordered in the depths of a poet's soul, the world looks fresher somehow. Your daily world has been taken out of context. It has the voice of the poet written all over it, for one thing, but it also seems suddenly more alive. Mark Strand's words. All right, so this is how it works. You have the list in your hand. So when it's, I don't introduce you. When it's your turn, you just get up and tell us who you are and what you're going to read. And I always like to hear why the poem that you've picked is kind of special to you. I'll start, as I always do. I'll start with a poem by Mary Oliver, who's one of America's, I would say, most beloved poets. I think she single-handedly introduced more people to contemporary poetry than anybody I can think of. And you'll notice on the list there's 2 poems by Mary Oliver today. The second one that you'll hear is the amazing Wild Geese, which in fact is, I have a copy of it on my bulletin board. I look at it almost every day. That's a really, truly amazing poem. Mary Oliver is 79 years old, and she's a little bit reclusive. She lives out in Provincetown, Massachusetts. But she recently did an interview with Krista Tippett, if you're familiar with the public radio program on Bean. Krista Tippett interviewed Mary Oliver. It's very, if you're a fan of hers, you should listen to it. It's really, it was really sort of surprising to me. I expected sort of a wise, gentle Buddha type person, and she turned out to be kind of crusty and very straightforward. But she said something about her childhood, which was apparently very difficult, and that she didn't like being in her house. In fact, she didn't even like being inside. So she spent a lot of time out wandering around in the woods. And she said, "I was saved by poetry and the beauty of the world." So in honor of spring, and also all the birds that are coming through our neighborhoods now as they migrate back up north, I'm going to read this lovely poem that she gathered in a book called Owls and Other Fantasies. It's a collection of her poems about birds, and this is called Such Singing in the Wild Branches. It was spring, and finally I heard him among the first leaves. Then I saw him clutching the limb in an island of shade, with his red-brown feathers all trim and neat for the new year. First I stood still and thought of nothing. Then I began to listen. Then I was filled with gladness, and that's when it happened, when I seemed to float, to be myself a wing or a tree, and I began to understand what the bird was saying. And the sands in the glass stopped for a pure white moment, while gravity sprinkled upward like rain rising, and in fact it became difficult to tell just what it was that was singing. It was the thrush for sure, but it seemed not a single thrush, but himself and all his brothers, and also the trees around them, as well as the gliding long-tailed clouds and the perfectly blue sky. All of them were singing. And of course, yes, so it seemed, so was I. Such soft and solemn and perfect music doesn't last for more than a few moments. It's one of those magical places wise people like to talk about. One of the things they say about it that is true is that once you've been there, you're there forever. Listen, everyone has a chance. Is it spring? Is it morning? Are there trees near you, and does your own soul need comforting? Quick then, open the door and fly on your heavy feet. The song may already be drifting away.
Hi, I'm Beth Bergfield, and the poem I chose was by W.B. Yeats. It reminds me of my first time that I lived abroad. I studied abroad in Ireland junior year of undergrad, and I was introduced to this poem by a professor who took us on the trip, and I've loved it ever since. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I'll arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin built there, of clay and wattles made. 9 beam rows will have there, a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bleak-loud glade. I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings, there midnights all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I'll arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway, or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. Thanks.
I'm Meg Wilkes-Carricker, and I'm in the sociology department. When my family was younger, a couple of decades ago, we used to every summer take a trip to the coastal islands in the southeastern United States. And I always thought those were restful periods, time to unplug, time to just sleep late and eat interesting food. I didn't realize what an impact it had on other members of my family until the poet Miriam Wilkes Carricker sent me this poem. She's entering the University of Minnesota's Master of Fine Arts program in poetry next year, and so I am not just honored but humbled to read this poem on her behalf. The Starfish in an Instant. In Tybee Island, Georgia, my sister and I run to the ocean with toy parasols and neon bathing suits. On my knees, I dangle my hand in the water. The tide tugs at my fingers, washing in, washing out, foam lingering in the folds of my hand. My fingers bend to the convex of a small wave until my hand contracts into itself. Fingers stiffen on small spines, rough and dry through dripping with water. Among odd spokes, kelp wrapped like an olive streamer. On this rust-orange steel brush skin, the stout needles make slight spirals on its body. It let me pick it up. It writhes, mouths at me urgently, but blanketed by oxygen, sea static, and children shrieking, it is speechless. It seems frightened, though it is eyeless, a form so classic it could be a surfside collectible or a roadside attraction cooked in coconut milk, a poison delicacy. Prickles of shock run down from my neck, down my arms, into my wrists, until I drop it.
Hello, my name is Peter Broik. I work in University Relations. And my poet of choice is Emily Wall. And she married a good friend of mine from college, so she's also a dear friend of mine. And just some context for who they are. They met on an international trip to England, dated long distance. She went to Colby College. My friend and I went to St. Olaf. After they graduated, they moved to Arizona so she could get her MFA at University of Arizona, and then without asking any of us, they moved to Juneau, Alaska, where they promptly bought a sailboat, which I could not envision. Sailboats mean tropics, not Juneau. So they bought that sailboat, then they sold that sailboat, bought a bigger sailboat, and then they lived on that boat for several years while my friend Corey got his degree in architecture at Vancouver. And then they've moved back. They've started a family. Emily's an associate professor at the university. Hi, Emily. And Corey is an architect, and she's written a couple books of poetry. I'm going to read a variety of books, a variety of poems from these books. She really gives you a sense of place. The first book is about moving to Alaska and that transition. And the second book is about their time living on the sailboat. The first poem is called Subsistence Stories. Sunset has already passed the Haynes Quick Shop Outfitter liquor store and rests now on the foreheads of the mountains beyond. Corey sketches a sailboat, old, wooden, steel patch blazoned on one side. It balances on wood blocks and an oil drum rusted into a landscape brown. Various locals come and go, buying videos, beer, chapstick. Over the highway a half hour ago, a bull moose calmly tasted the brush. We stopped walking. 2 cars stopped. The stray mutt who had followed us from town trembled, growled at the base of her black throat. On the eve of our second anniversary, we are content to sit, backs to the post office wall, quiet, except for Corey's pencil scratching the grace of the boat. At the city harbor, a sailboat skipper told us she had sunk twice in the slip by his own boat, so had been abandoned to land. Her mast down, the backbone of a small mastodon rests on the bones of a fishing boat. Next to her, also propped on steel drums. Like an old couple flapping age spots of rust, they wait. The post office behind us is closing, keys in hand, doors slam. Around the corner come a woman and her dog, German Shepherd and Wolf mix, down from Copper River. We swap weather, day events, bear stories. We tell her about the bull moose, and she tells us she has been charged 3 times by one crazy cow. She asks why we were here. We tell her it's our anniversary. She is having her 35th in a month. The wind picks up, and the sun feathers the mountains in such a way that only their snow peaks are illumined, like herring gulls taking flight into light. My hands grow cold, and I dream of a booth at the local restaurant. Corey is shading the lines of the drowned bough. The grass quivers, and I notice the small birch in front of me has held small bits of leaf on every branch, just the tips of leaf husks, like an old woman saving bits of her life, quilting them at night on her eyelids. And this seems to me some kind of key. I pick it up, add it to my pile of charms and wishes, prayers kept in the pillowcase of my ribs. So the second poem is from their time living in Vancouver on the boat. It's called Live Aboard. The most beautiful garden in the world is a dock garden. At the foot of the ramp on B Dock, Cheryl has created a utopia of potted plants. Tendrils climb the power pole, vines cover the sign that warns us of electric current. There are hanging plants on all the pilings that go up and down and up again. She waters at high tide when the hanging pots are waist high. There are cherry tomatoes, and we help ourselves as we pass on the way to our own boats, sweetness bursting on our tongues as we walk down the wooden dock. Almost all of us have small gardens too. A few pots of straw flowers or pansies. Tony, living in his float home, has flowers that attract hummingbirds. A mallard pair uses a pot of petunias on Lorna's dock as a nest. Each evening we gather around to admire the 5 creamy eggs, and when they hatch, the ducks are born right onto the soil and pop out of the plant one by one as we watch. Even the woman on the other Tayana, who we meet in Montague Harbor, who is heading out for a cruise around the world, has an herb garden in tiny pots attached to her cockpit rail. She dug up her favorite plants from the sprawling house and is taking them with her, despite her husband's irritation. The boat is offshore ready, outfitted with $10,000 of electronics. Hull and deck are perfect, but she cannot give up a small patch of soil with her thyme and mint and sage. Even though we live on water, we all keep a small patch of earth near us and dig our fingers into it each evening, smelling the soil on our hands, catching it under our nails, before we step on board to sleep on nothing more substantial than water and a fast river current. And my final poem is called Navigating Faith. If heaven was in the North Country, the voice of God calling us home would be Canada geese, wild arrows showing us the way, reminding us as they pass over our working bodies that this is where we too will go. Now in a heavy rain, as they pass above us, singing their hymn of holy highways, we look up, watch the wake of their bodies cutting through thick clouds, and the clear direction they offer us. This morning makes it easy. Of course, I'll follow them up into the North Mountains of mist and spruce, up to a God who loves our heavy feathered bodies.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Tao and I'm a senior here at St. Thomas, majoring in communication and journalism. I'm also an apartment coordinator in the Child Development Center, one of our residence halls on campus. Today I will be reading Our Greatest Fear by Marianne Williamson. The reason why I chose this was because it's very inspiring, and I first heard the poem when I was doing a program at St. Kate's called the First Step Program, and so ever since then it really stuck with me. So, Our Greatest Fear by Marianne Williamson. Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people feel won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And then my next poem is Phenomenal Woman by Maya Angelou. And I chose this because I'm really big on just empowering women, and I'm just proud of the woman I am today. And it's just an honor to read Maya Angelou's poem in front of you all today. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenally phenomenal woman. That's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honey bees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing of my waist and the joy of my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally phenomenal woman. That's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say, it's in the arc of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breasts, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenally phenomenal woman. That's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud, I say. It's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need of my care. 'Cause I'm a woman, phenomenally phenomenal woman. That's me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Pinchansky, Theology Department, and I've been reading a poem to my classes every single morning for years, and these are three of the ones that come up every semester that I really like. The first one is by Anne Sexton, my favorite poet, and it's called Frenzy. I am not lazy. I am on the amphetamine of the soul. I am each day typing out the God my typewriter believes in. Very quick, very intense, like a wolf at a live heart. Not lazy. When a lazy man, they say, looks toward heaven, the angels close the windows. Oh, angels, keep the windows open, so that I may reach in and steal each object. Objects that tell me the sea is not dying. Objects that tell me the dirt has a life wish. That the Christ who walked for me walked on true ground. And that this frenzy, like bees stinging the heart all morning, will keep the angels with their windows open, wide as an English bathtub. And two from Gerard Manley Hopkins. They don't have any names, they just named after the first line. So this is E.E. Cummings, excuse me. E.E. Cummings. May my heart always be open to little birds who are the secret of living. Whatever they sing is better than to know. And if men should not hear them, men are old. May my mind stroll about hungry and fearless and thirsty and supple. And even if it's Sunday, may I be wrong. For whenever men are right, they are not young. And may myself do nothing usefully and love yourself so more than truly. There's never been quite such a fool who could fail, pulling all the sky over him with one smile. One more. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great, happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the know of all nothing, human, merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. Thank you.
I'm Anne-Marie Klein from the Catholic Studies program, and I chose a poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins that presents what I think is quite a surprising comparison. Most of Hopkins' women, most of the women that Hopkins portrays, he portrays them in a heroic way and compares them, for instance, to something for their beauty, for instance, of their self-giving, like that of the young martyr Saint Thecla, whom he compares to a plumed passion flower, or for particular virtue, like that of the exiled Franciscan, whom he compares to a lioness. Or for a particular talent, he compares one poet to a nightingale. But in this poem, he compares Mary to air, which initially sounds like an insult, I have to say, because air has no visible beauty, and rarely it's even noticed. I chose this poem, The Blessed Virgin Compared to the Air We Breathe, because it exhibits Hopkins' wit, his creative wordplay, his imaginative weaving of concepts from theology and science, and his fresh musical approach to the metaphysical lyric. Wild air, world-mothering air, nestling me everywhere, that each eyelash or hair girdles, goes home betwixt the fleeciest, frailest fixed snowflake, that's fairly mixed with riddles and is rife in every least thing's life. This needful, never spent, and nursing element, my more than meat and drink, my meal at every wink. This air, which by life's law my lung must draw and draw, now but to breathe its praise, minds me in many ways of her, who not only gave God's infinity dwindled to infancy, welcome in home and breast, birth, milk, and all the rest, but mothers each new grace that does now reach our race. Mary Immaculate, merely a woman, yet whose presence, power is great, as no goddesses, was deem it, dream it, who this one work has to do, let all God's glory through. God's glory, which would go through her and from her flow, off and no way but so. I say that we are wound with mercy round and round as if with air, the same as Mary, more by name. She, wild web, wondrous robe, mantles the guilty globe, since God has let dispense her prayers his providence. Nay, more than almoner, the sweet alms self is her, and men are meant to share her life as life does air. If I have understood, she holds high motherhood towards all our ghostly good, and plays in grace her part about man's beating heart, laying like air's fine flood the death dance in his blood. Yet no part but what will be Christ our Savior still. Of her flesh he took flesh, and he does fresh and fresh, though much the mystery how, not flesh but spirit now, and makes all marvelous new Nazareth in us, where she shall yet conceive him morning, noon, and eve, new Bethlehems, and he born there evening, noon, and morn. Bethlehem or Nazareth, men here may draw like breath, more Christ and baffle death. Who born so comes to be new self and nobler me. And each one more makes, when all is done, both God and Mary's Son. Again, look over it, how air is azured. Oh, how, nay, do but stand, where you can lift your hand skywards. Rich, rich it laps around the four-finger gaps. Yet such a sapphire shot, charged, steeped sky will not stain light. Yea, mark you this, it does no prejudice. The glass blue days are those when every color glows, each shape and shadow shows. Blue be it, this blue heaven, the 7 times 7, 7-hued sunbeam, will transmit perfect, not alter it. Or if there does some soft, on things aloof, aloft, bloom breathe that one breath more, earth is the fairer for. Whereas did air not make this bath and blue and slake his fire, the sun would shake, a blear and blinding ball, with blackness bound and all. The thick stars round him roll, flashing like flecks of coal, quartz fret, or sparks of salt, in grimy vasty vault. So God was God of old. A mother came to mold those limbs like ours, which are what must make our day star much dearer to mankind, whose glory bare would blind or less would win man's mind. Through her we may see him, made sweeter, not made dim, and her hand leaves his light sifted to suit our sight. Be then, O thou dear mother, my atmosphere, my happier world, wherein to wend and meet no sin, above me, round me lie, fronting my froward eye, with sweet and scarless sky. Stir in my ears, speak there of God's love, O lithe air of patience, penance, prayer, world-mothering air, air wild, wound thee, in thee isled, fold home, fast fold thy child. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Klein, no relation to the previous reader. I teach in Justice and Peace Studies, and I was fortunate to have in my class a number of years ago a student who became a spoken word poet. I read one of his works last year when I was privileged to speak here, and so rather than read another one of his, I asked him what I should read next. And he recommended this poem, in part because of the events of the last year in Ferguson, in Staten Island, now in Baltimore, but also for hope, for a sense of finding the humanness in those difficult situations and finding the moments when we can remind ourselves how interrelated we are. So this poem is by Ross Gay, To the Fig Tree on 9th and Christian. Tumbling through the city in my mind without once looking up, the racket in the lugwork, probably rehearsing some stupid thing I said or did, some crime or other. The city, they say, is a lonely place, until, yes, the sound of sweeping, and a woman, yes, with a broom, beneath which you are now to the canopy of a fig, its arms pulling the September sun to it, and she has a hose, too, and works so hard rinsing and scrubbing the walk, lest some poor sod slip on the silk of a fig and break his hip, and not probably reach over to gobble up the perpetrator. The light catches the veins in her hands. When I ask about the tree, they flutter in the air, and she says, "Take as much as you can, help me." So I load my pockets and my mouth, and she points to a stepladder against the wall to mean more. But I was without a sack, so my meager plunder would have to suffice. And an old woman whom gravity was pulling into the earth loosed one from a low-slung branch, and its eye wept like hers, which she dabbed with a kerchief, as she cleaved the fig with what remained of her 8 or 9 teeth. Soon there were people gathered beneath the tree, looking into it like a constellation, pointing. Do you see it? And I am tall and so good for these things. And a bald man even told me so when I grabbed 3 or 4 for him, reaching into the giddy throngs of wasps, sugar stoned, which he only pointed to smiling and rubbing his stomach. I mean, he was really rubbing his stomach. It was hot, and his head shone while he offered recipes to the group using words which I couldn't understand. And besides, I was a little tipsy on the dance of the velvety heart rolling in my mouth, pulling me down and down into the oldest countries of my body where I ate my first fig, from the hand of a man who escaped his country by swimming through the night, and maybe never said more than 5 words to me at once, but gave me figs. And a man on his way to work hops twice to reach at last his fig, which he smiles at and calls baby. Come here, baby, he says. And he blows a kiss to the tree, which everyone knows cannot grow this far north, being Mediterranean and favoring the rocky, sun-baked soils of Jordan or Sicily. But no one told the fig tree or the immigrants. There is a way the fig tree grows in groves it wants. It seems to hold us. Yes, I am anthropomorphizing. Damn it, I have twice. In the last 30 seconds, rubbed my sweaty forearm into someone else's sweaty shoulder, gleefully eating out of each other's hands on Christian Street in Philadelphia. A street, like most, which has murdered its own people, this is true. But we are feeding each other from a tree at the corner of Christian and 9th. Strangers, maybe, never again.
Hi, I'm Amy Gage. I'm the neighborhood liaison at St. Thomas, or the new John Hershey is the easiest way to introduce myself. I've been here about 11 months. Like Dan, I find Mary Oliver to be an accessible poet. I was an English and Women's Studies major at the U of M, but I've really never been a student of poetry. But I think of her as the people's poet, and I think of her as someone who speaks to those of us who really find spirituality in nature. I have found at middle age that life becomes more precious, more poignant, and Mary Oliver's poetry, which I first heard in a Unitarian Universalist sanctuary in Northfield, reminds me to be still. It reminds me of the sanctity of nature. And it takes me back to the 20 years that my husband and I spent in Northfield raising our children. I commuted and lived a life with my feet very much in 2 different worlds, working up here, living down there. But every weekend morning, I would take my 2 dogs, either to the Carlton Arboretum or the St. Olaf Natural Lands, and we would get lost. And I would get lost in my thoughts. And Mary Oliver's poem reminds me of those days. This is called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. The second poem I'm going to read is actually by a poet I had never heard of. This poem was a gift to me by my running partner when I worked at St. Catherine University. She'd heard this in a yoga class. And I want to dedicate this to the men and women in university relations on Doug Hennis's team, who practice yoga with me weekly in McCarthy Gym. It has really been a blessed and fun way for me to get to know my new colleagues, and it's become really just a very special hour of my week. This is called Whatever Doesn't Serve by Dana Faulds. What weight can you put down right now, willingly relinquishing the pointed quills of guilt or judgment? What burden of the heart can lift? What dark corner can be lit? The candle flickering at first, then burning bright. With the next breath, let it go. That old story you've told yourself 1,000,000 times. Whatever doesn't serve you on this path of truth, leave it behind. Offer this one gift, the simple sacrifice that, in the giving, sets you free to fully live. Thank you.
I'm Marty Warren from English, and I'm going to read an extract from Chaucer's Miller's Tale from the Canterbury Tales. Canterbury Tales is a really fascinating poem because in it we see Chaucer doing what I admire most, which is he's playing the diplomat. You never know which side he's on, whose side he's taking, but you can be sure he's doing what he's doing very tongue-in-cheek, and that he is making a very significant point. In the Canterbury Tales, we have pilgrims on their way to Canterbury, so it's meant to be a very holy and sacred time. The telling of the tales begins with the knight's tale. Seems appropriate. That's the social hierarchy. Knights at the top. The knight's tale is typical. It's a wonderful romance, medieval romance. Two knights, good friends, in love with the same woman, Emily. They end up in a jousting tournament, and I won't tell you what happens. But you can see it's typically romantic, very aristocratic, etc., etc. The miller, who's drunk, which seems to be pretty much his way of life beyond milling stuff, decides the hierarchy needs upsetting. So is it the miller? Is it Chaucer? Who's talking about upsetting the social hierarchy? So rather than go down the social line from top to bottom, telling appropriate tales, the miller butts in and decides it's his turn, and the knight's tale, while lovely and romantic, is really in its own way quite dull from his point of view. So he tells about a love triangle too, but rather than Emily and Palamon and Arquita and jousting, this is Alison, Nicholas, and Absalom. And Alison is simply the wife of an old man, John the Carpenter. Nicholas is a university student who lodges with them at their house and is a typical university student. They haven't changed over the centuries. And then there is Absalom, who is this musician who is very much taken with Alison too. Alison, despite being married, she's much, much younger than John, has a roving eye, and the question is, who gets what in terms of Nicholas and Absalom? Nicholas, university student, uses his learning. He uses it well. So he tells John about the story of Noah's flood from Genesis and changes the ending a bit. If you remember the story, God says God will not flood the world again. Nicholas changes it and says, well, be careful. God's going to flood the world at any minute. So John, you're a carpenter, use your skills. Build 3 nice wooden tubs, one for you, one for Alison, one for me. So when the flood comes, we can happily float away. John does that. Nicholas tells him, take the wooden tubs, hang them up in the eaves of the building, and Alison and I will be downstairs when needed if the flood comes. And you can guess Alison and Nicholas are not praying. So, Absalom too wants Alison. When he comes singing under the window, he gets more than he bargains for, in the sense that he doesn't kiss her on her luscious lips. She sticks her butt out the window. So he's going to come back and avenge himself. And where we are is towards the end of the tale, where this vengeance is going to take place. Absalom has a nice hot iron that he's borrowed from the blacksmith, and Nicholas thinks he'll play the role of Allison. I'm telling you all this so you get some sense of what's going on, but what's not revealed on the program is this is not going to be in contemporary English. Okay? The part of doing this today was I was challenged, I won't say by whom, certain librarian person, to do something in Middle English. So here we are with Absalom playing the role of the lover, coming back for this second luscious kiss from Allison. Full soft out at the door he gan to stale, and went unto the carpenter's wall. He cocketh first, and knocketh therewithal upon the window richt as he did ere. This Allison answered, Who is there that knocketh so? Ye warrant it a thief. We nay, quod he, ye have they brocht a ring. Me moder yaffet may, so God may save. Full feen it is, and thereto well y grave. This wall ye gave thee, if thou may kiss. This Nicholas was reason for to piss, and thocht he would amend an all the job. He should kiss his heirs ere that he scap. And up the window did he hastily, and out his heirs he putteth privily, over the buttock to the haunch o' bone. And therewith spake this clerk, this Absalom. Spake, sweet brid, enough now where thou art. This Nicholas anon let flay a fart, as great as it had been a thunder dent, that with the stroke he was almost blent. And he was ready with his earen hot. And Nicholas amid the airs he smote. Off goeth the skin and hand bred a boot. The hot culter brenda saw his toot, and for the smart he wenden for to die. As he were word for war, he gan to cry, Help! Water! Water! Help! For Goddess hurt! This carpenter out of his slumber stert, and heard uncrean Water! As if he were wod, and thucked, Alas! No cometh Nolus's flood. He set him up with outen wordus more, and with his axe he smote the cord at war, and doon goth all. He found neither to sell, ne bread ne all, till he came to the cell, upon the floor, and there a swan he lay. Up stared here Allison and Nicolay, and creeden, Out! And hurroo! In the street. The neighbours, both small and great, in running, for to gowren on this man, that yet a swoon he lie, both pale and wan. For with the fall he brusten had his arm, but studden he most unto his own harm. For when he spak, he was a nun bore down with Henda Nicholas and Allison. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Davidson. I'm a librarian at Minneapolis, and I couldn't decide. no poem popped to mind, so I was wandering around Google, and I found this poem that I really liked, and then I looked up some articles on it, which of course will be available to you if you need them, since I really am a librarian deep down. I actually found that he was, this is a poem about World War I and living in the trenches. And he's a Jewish poet who grew up very poor, could not go to school very far, always felt limited because of his education being so limited, but he was pretty amazing and unfortunately died during the war, but he left something wonderful for us. So, it's called Break of Day in the Trenches. The darkness crumbles away. It is the same old druid time as ever. Only a living thing leaps my hand, a queer sardonic rat, as I pull the parapet's poppy to stick behind my ear. Droll rat, they would shoot you if they knew your cosmopolitan sympathies. Now you have touched this English hand. You will do the same to a German soon, no doubt, if it be your pleasure to cross the sleeping green between. It seems you inwardly grin as you pass. Strong eyes, fine limbs, haughty athletes, less chanced than you for life, bonds to the whims of murder, sprawled in the bowels of the earth, the torn fields of France. What do you see in our eyes at the shrinking iron and flame, hurled still heavens? What quaver, what heart aghast? Poppies whose roots are in men's veins drop, and are ever dropping, but mine in my ear is safe, just a little white with the dust.
Okay, so I'll start out by introducing myself. I'm Maggie Dawson. I'm a sophomore, and I'm double majoring in English with a writing emphasis and Spanish literature. But I'm reading this on behalf of my friend Hannah Tilstra, who signed up for the poetry on the patio, but recently lost her voice, traded it for legs or something. And this is the poem Famous by Naomi Shihab. Hannah says she reads it when she's trying to make a life decision because it's a good reminder to remember what makes you special, and that what makes you special might be different from what makes other people famous. So this is Famous by Naomi Shihab. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to the silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds, watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous briefly to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to the floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing the streets, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in a way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. You read beautifully. You're all famous now. Yeah, I often say this is kind of like a potluck, where you don't tell people what to bring and they just bring things, but it works out. It always works out. There's enough salad, there's enough, dessert and, hot dishes and so forth. So thank you very much. It was lovely. You read beautifully, and I will see you next year.